All right. So this is the training all about building the why. So with this, we always kind of start these off on like, who I am and why we got into this, right? So my name's Joey Connolly. I got into life insurance right really at like the beginning of this year and wasn't really full time with it until about March. I came from the door-to-door industry, from the solar industry. I did solar for 4 years. I did alarm sales for a couple years before that. So I came in from like the door-to-door world, which, if you've heard me talk about it, I don't want to go on like a rant about this 'cause I've done a training, kind of mentioned it before, but it was really good sales experience. I'm glad I did it. Biggest reason why I got into life insurance was really just because of the stability that we have with this industry and how consistent it is. Once you get going in this industry, the best thing about it is that you get paid pretty much every single day. You have policies hitting all the time. You have checks coming in literally every single day. And there's really not a lot of whole lot of industries like that where the volume of the amount of sales you're getting is so high, right? Like in the solar world, somebody who's really good is maybe going to get, the way we did it was we would do like 10-day blitzes and we'd go like work 12 hours a day for 10 days in a row. And regardless, though, even for people that do solar full time in a local market, their like best months typically are like 8 to 10 installs a month. So imagine having like only eight. Yes, the commissions are bigger, but like you have 8 to 10 installs a month. With life insurance, a good agent's going to do 40 to 70 policies every single month. So you get a lot more reps in this industry, you close a lot more people overall, and you get paid a lot more frequently. And it's not seasonal. We have all year to sell. All year is great. There's no bad months, good months. It's just really consistent. And it's an industry that's been around for a super long time. So just, remember to be really grateful for that because there's a lot of sales industries out there that I promise you are a lot harder than this. But let's talk about the why. So I'm going to share my screen here in a second and kind of go through the script. I want to kind of go over like exactly how I say the lines that I say at certain parts of the script and be like super actionable advice in this training. But just to real quickly touch on like why I think it's important to build the why. So first off, like when you can sell, and I tell this to all the new guys in my group or whatever, when you can really sell plenty of insurance, literally just reading right off our script. Mahmood and them have created like $1 million script, right? Because it does work and you can legitimately read word for word off the script. And if you say it in the proper way and you make some jokes here and there, you can still honestly be a 30K a month producer, in my opinion, if you make enough dials, right? If you're dialing 600, 700 times a day, you can just read off the script and you can sell plenty of insurance, which is kind of amazing. However, if you want to get good, you want to sell more with less dials, or you want to, hit 40, 50, 60K a month, you have to learn how to build the why. Everyone's heard in here, the script is a guide, not a cage. And yes, the flow of the script, I always stick to that. And like 90% of what I say is directly off the script. However, if you're not able to have a real conversation with these people and treat them like a human being and actually be a salesperson, then you're never going to be like an elite closer. You're never going to move to like that next level, right? So you want to be able to have the script memorized. That way you can deviate off of it. If you don't know the steps of the pitch, you know, introduction, beneficial, if you don't know like the overall format, you got to at least have that memorized. Because if you don't have that memorized and you can't do that from memory, you're never going to be like able to deviate and go off script and do things in the background, quoting while you're talking, stuff like that. So obviously, if you're brand new, you've been here for a month, a week, whatever it is, like don't be worried that you don't have it memorized yet. It does come with time, but you just have to get to that point as soon as you can, right? Why it's important to build the why is because it's going to, first off, it's going to avoid a lot of objections later on in the script. If you're somebody who's getting a lot of banking objections, you're getting social security objections, you're getting the I want to think about it objection or whatever it is, it's most likely because you didn't build enough of a why. And they don't really even know why they're talking to you and they don't really see a need or feel the need to actually buy the life insurance, right? You got to think about it logically. These people they're committing to spend money every single month. And the people that we sell, 90% of the time, these aren't rich people, guys. Like they don't have a ton of money. They're basically living off Social Security, maybe a pension from the post office or like whatever it is, right? These people don't have a ton of money. Everybody on this Zoom right now will be way more financially stable than everyone you're talking to on a daily basis when you get to that age. As long as you don't, screw up somewhere in your life. But You just got to realize that like they are committing to spend money with you. They're giving you their social security number. They're giving you their bank account information. And I don't say that to make it a big deal because you shouldn't make it a big deal or else they're going to feel like it's a big deal. However, that is what's going on in their mind, right? So if they don't feel the need for this product, they're going to give you an objection because it's maybe it is that they don't trust you, or maybe it's just the fact that they don't want it and they're disguising their lack of need for the product or their lack of the feel that they need. They don't feel like they need it. They're disguising that with a social security objection, right? So you're going to get less objections when you build a big why. Overall, you're going to have happier clients. And at the end of the day, isn't that what we're all doing this for, right? Is to have happy clients and to actually protect families and, help people change, like help them feel like they're going to bed, they're going to sleep easier because they know like they have something in place to protect their kids. And then also it leads to stickier business, right? I think this is really important when you're buttoning up the sale. I'm going to go over this on a why to build the why, especially at the very end of the sale. And that just overall leads to stickier business. You're going to have way higher consistency, way higher cancellation rate, all that kind of stuff. Um, One thing too I want to talk on is just like how you can utilize stories with building the why, right? I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and kind of start going through the script. And I'll kind of go over the different points of the script where I build the why particularly. Um, but first thing I just want to, before I kind of go into that, is just utilizing different stories in order to build the why. So one story that I like to tell pretty frequently is, what really stuck, I tried this out and it kind of worked, and I kind of got better and better at it. And then one day I had a guy call me back, and everybody knows whenever you get like a call from a client, sometimes your your heart drops a little bit and you're like, "Oh, damn it, this guy wants to cancel or something." You kind of assume the worst, right? Which you shouldn't, but we just kind of naturally do. Or at least I do. But I tell this story sometimes where I'll usually around this part of the script right here, where I'm trying to like, I don't know why that's highlighted red, where I'm kind of trying to like dig into the why a little bit, right? And if I'm kind of if I'm it's a story I'll use when they're not really giving me much and they're kind of being a little bit dry. They're not really, going into depth about their beneficiary and what kind of position they're in, and they're kind of being short with me. I'll tell this story of like, because this kind of gets them to open up sometimes. I'll say, yeah, man, so I mean, I've been working here for a while, and I kind of act like I'm like, again, I never say I'm with the VA because you never should do that. That is fraud, and you can lose your license. But I just, again, like I act like I work in an insurance office, and I don't act like I don't work from home, right? That's kind of like my personality when I'm on the phone. But yeah, man, I've been working here for a while. And sadly, like we get people call in all the time. A lot of the time it's family members and they'll be asking, "Hey, did my dad get that coverage or, something happened to him, he passed away, like how do we collect the money?" And then we have to tell them like, "Hey, I'm sorry, but like he had told us that, he wasn't ready, he needed to wait or he wanted to think about it or I can't remember exactly what it was, man, but like he didn't end up actually getting the coverage. I'm sorry." And we hear horror stories like that all the time, sir. So, good on you for being proactive and looking at this now. And I'll tell that story and you can word it a little bit differently, but and I'll say that story, then I'll ask, have that ever happened to anybody that you know of where, they passed away and they didn't have any coverage and it kind of left the family in a financial bind? And then after you kind of tell that story, it can sometimes get them to open up a little bit. And that's just one example of like a good story that I like to use. So feel free to steal that story of basically just like, yeah, man, I've dealt with people who thought that their husband or dad or whatever, I'll frame it to their situation, got coverage. And then I like to add in there, but like, good on you for doing this now. Because most people wait until it's too late. And I can tell you're a proactive guy. So good on you for doing this, sir. Good on you for doing this, ma'am, and taking care of your boys, whatever it is, right? And it just kind of like it's a positive framing technique where you're basically telling them like, hey, you're a good person and you're smart for doing this now. Because most people are stupid and they wait until it's too late, right? And I'm not, obviously you're not straight out saying that, but you're kind of implying that through the use of a story. And you got to be careful because sometimes, they can pick up on the sales vibe right there. So you got to be kind of really casual about it. Um, and then also just that story is a good example of one that I use. And then personal stories as well. I don't have any personal stories, so I don't like to lie on the phone and just completely make stuff up. Because it just comes off fishy to me and salesy. But if you have personal stories, please use them. You know, like if you have a family member who's passed away, like I truly don't in my life. Like I've been really, really blessed. I think the only family member I've ever lost in my life was like a great great grandfather who I really didn't know when I was really young. So I don't really have any personal stories, but don't be afraid to use personal stories. I hear guys in my group use them and they work because they come from the heart, you know? But I'm going to kind of go through the script here and kind of just go through the places where I try to build the why throughout the script, kind of how I do it and why I do it. Um, and we can kind of just follow along. If you're listening, it should be good as well. If you have your screen pulled up, even better. But obviously, first off, I mean, this is very obvious, as a lot of these will be, right? But first off, when you're in the introduction, and I don't want to turn this into like an introduction training because you can talk for an hour just on that, but you have to establish the base level why before you even move to the next page or even move to the beneficiary, right? So you have to establish with like direct questions what the why is roughly going to be, right? And if they're just like, yep, I just want to get my funeral expenses covered, awesome, you can move on from there. And then you have that base level of what the why is, and then you can dig deeper into it in the next section of the next paragraph, right? But you can't just really bulldoze somebody. I mean, sometimes you can, but that's again going to end, they're going to cut the conversation short, or you're going to get an objection later on, or something's going to happen. You have to at least establish, in my opinion, why you're talking to this person in this introduction part, right? So this can be, you know, funeral burial expenses. That's the most common and the most obvious for what we sell, which is final expense, right? You could also go into income replacement. You can go into the mortgage protection, smaller debts, you know, car notes, credit card debt, stuff like that. Leaving money behind for family. I love you money, whatever it is. So you have to at least establish like what the initial why is and why they're looking into this, right? You have to ask the questions to pull that out of them because there's no point in being like, okay, perfect, sir. And then if you pass away, who's going to be your beneficiary if they've been telling you, no, I got my funeral covered. No, I don't have a mortgage. No, my family's taken care of. It just doesn't make any logical sense to go into the next part, right? So you got to first at least establish what the why is in that first paragraph right there. And then coming into the beneficiary here, um, I mean, guys, like 90% of what I say is pretty much right off the script. Obviously, I word things a little bit differently, but I use our flow every single time. And that's what I think is great is you have guys who sell double what I sell, and you guys have selling around what I sell, 40, 50, 60K a month, using the exact same script that everybody else has, right? So, but right here, obviously, this is everyone knows to ask these questions right here. You know, are they in a financial position to cover the funeral expense, or is that kind of why you were looking into this? And real quick on tonality, whenever you ask these why questions or these digging questions, these sensitive kind of questions, right? Because when you're talking about the why, for somebody who doesn't know, the why is who they're doing this for, why they are doing this, right? So the beneficiary, right? Their kids, their spouse, whoever it is, right? Doesn't matter. Their close friend. You just want to try to make that relationship feel as tight as possible, and you want to make that you want to talk about them as much as possible throughout the entire script. Any chance you have to bring the beneficiary back up, please do it. Whether it's on health questions, whether you're talking about their income, whether doesn't matter what it is. And that's kind of the whole theme of what I'm going to go over here is you should be bringing the why up as often as possible, any chance you get. Um, and again, the why is the beneficiary. That's what that means. It's why they're doing it, right? If you're new and you don't know that, that's essentially what that means. Um, so when you're asking these questions, you have to have kind of like I like to have like a curious, caring tonality, right? I'm not just gonna be like, and then Bob, would your daughter Jamie, would she be in a financial position to cover a funeral, or is that why you're looking into this, sir? Like I might use that tonality in the introduction, or I might use that tonality when I'm going through the health questions. But when I'm going through talking about the beneficiary, I'm gonna be like, and then, Mr. Bob, would your daughter Jamie, would she be in a financial position to cover a funeral? Or is that kind of why you're looking into this, sir? You know, something like that. I honestly didn't love that, but something like that, right? And then Bob, would Jamie be in a financial position to cover a funeral? Or is that why you were looking into this? You know, something along those lines, kind of a caring tonality that's gonna like pull information out of them. You don't want to sound like a robot. You don't want to sound like too authoritative. You want to have that curious, caring human-like tonality, right? Like you're talking to a loved one and you're asking a sensitive question. And because you are, right? You're asking kind of tough questions here. And that's one thing about sales and especially with the why in general is you have to get used to asking these kind of awkward questions. And when you're in the beginning, you can feel really weird about doing it, and you can be nervous to ask them. You feel like you're going to kind of piss them off, or you just feel awkward about it, or whatever it is. Like, but you're never going to be an elite closer if you can't get yourself to ask these hard questions. Is that right? That's what being a lot of being in sales, whether it's asking for the close, those awkward silences, talking, digging into the why, digging into their financial situation. Like you have to get used to doing these awkward things, or else you're never really gonna hit that next level. So, and again, in the beginning, I get it. You aren't ready for that sometimes, but that's how you get good. Um, but all right, back to this. So, are they in a position to cover it, or is that kind of why you were looking into this? Yeah, no. And if they say no, they're not in a position to cover it, awesome. Not awesome, but for for the sake of your conversation, your sale, obviously it's a good thing. But if they're like, oh no, they'd be in a position to cover it, then I'm usually gonna, if they say that, which they do a lot of the time, then I'm usually gonna start with this follow-up. And always gonna go two or three questions deep here, very at the minimum, right? If they say, oh no, they would be in a position to cover it. Then I'll say something like, "Oh, okay, I gotcha, sir." So you're probably like most veterans I talk to, where even if I'm just going to use for this example your daughter, even if your daughter Maria, even if she could cover that funeral expense, you're probably like most veterans I talk to, where you just want to have a policy in place that's going to cover it for her, just so she doesn't have to pay anything out of pocket and reach in her own bank account for that expense. Is that kind of the reason you were looking into this, sir? Again, I'm reconfirming the why. I'm tying them back down again, right? I like to tie them down like at least three or four different times throughout the script. And what a tie down means for somebody who doesn't know is basically like you're getting them to commit to something. You're getting them to admit to this is why I want to do this. And when you get objections later on in the script, you're able to throw that back in their face and say, well, Mr. Bob, like you're 75 years old, sir. Realistically, how long do you want to wait to do this? You did mention to me that Maria, your daughter, wouldn't be in a financial position to do this. She's got two kids and she only works at Walmart, right? Yeah, so really what's riskier, Mr. Bob? You paying $100 a month or Maria having to come up with 10 grand? You can use the why later on as like almost like a hard close, as like a last resort close to like throw it in their face, right? Um, and again, I'm not saying like be a jerk about it, but it's just you want that ammunition for later. Um, but no, so go back to this and then say they're like that's kind of the question I'll start with if they tell me that they're in a financial position to cover it, like because people just kind of get embarrassed, they don't want to admit something even if it is true. I bet you a lot of the times, even when they say, "Oh no, they would be in a position to cover it," they're probably not. And then how I'll kind of figure that out, I'd be like, oh, okay, or so you're probably just like most people I work with, where even if they could afford it, you'd rather have a policy in place that covers this for them. That way, they're not paying for anything during that time. Is that correct, sir? Yeah, and then just that's kind of the same reason most veterans fill these out, sir. Um, obviously, whenever you pass away, it's going to be a pretty big emotional burden on your daughter Maria. I know you probably obviously you've been her dad her whole life, and the last thing anybody wants is leaving a financial toll on top of that. You know what I mean, sir? Yeah, get an agree there. Okay, what does Maria do for work, by the way? That's the easiest one, especially if it's a daughter, a son, or a kid of any kind. That's like the easiest lead-in question ever because it just sounds super conversational and it doesn't really sound to me like you're like trying to dig into like their situation. It's just like, oh yeah, what does she do for work, by the way? And then I kind of just say it like that, just like super casual. But I'm asking that question not because I give a shit what they do for work. I mean, I guess I do, but not really. It's just really because I want to figure out what their financial situation is like, right? Like, oh, she works at the post office. Okay, cool. Yeah, how long she been working there for? 10 years. Oh, wow, she must like it. Okay, cool. Yeah. Does she have kids? You got any grandkids with Maria? Awesome. Yeah. Oh, she's got two kids. Oh, that's awesome. Congratulations, Mr. Bob. You have a big family. I'm jealous. Yes, sir. Yeah, and and then from there, I'm kind of be like, well, I can tell, working at the post office, she has a full-time job, she's got two kids. Is she married? Yeah, what does he do for work? And then I'm like getting the full financial picture, right? Obviously, if they're like, you have a little bit more of an uphill battle. If he's like, oh, her doctor's or her husband's a lawyer, he makes big money, then it's like, okay, you can't really pull on that as hard. But if they're like, oh yeah, he's a I don't know, mechanic, and she works at the post office, right? Be like, oh, I got you. Yeah. So they both got full-time jobs. Oh wow, that's yeah, you raised a good one there, Mr. Bob. Well, I'm sure that's probably part of the reason why you wanted to get this in place, sir. It sounds like to me they got their hands full with the kids and everything as it is. Am I right? Something like that. Just again, adding more of a why. You always want to go like two or three questions deeper right here on the beneficiary, their situation, and why they want to get this, right? And really just trying to paint that picture of their daughter or their wife or whatever struggling whenever they're to pay this whenever they're passing away, right? So like what is their situation like? What's their income like? And again, I'm not just like what's her situation? What's her income? Does she have kids? Like I'm fishing this out with like a conversational tone, joking manner kind of deal in a way sometimes. To figure out your style, figure out how you can ask these questions without being like does your daughter have enough money to pay for a funeral? Where does she work? Is she poor? Like, you know what I mean? You can't say it like that, obviously. You have to kind of just like fish it out in a smooth conversational manner. Um, Other questions you can ask is like, if God forbid, sir, you did pass away and you didn't have any coverage, what would it look like for your daughter Maria to have to cover that? Would she have to, raise money? Would she have to go into debt, throw it on a credit card? What do you think that would look like? That can be a little bit more of an aggressive question in a way. I really would probably ask that if they're being like super dry, but that is a good question as well. And then also, do you know anyone that this has happened to, sir? And you can use this one later on in the script. I'll sometimes ask this before banking, or I'll ask this like after banking, even sometimes, where I'll say something like, and then, Mr. Bob, I know you've been looking into this for a while. What was it that kind of got you looking into this? Did you know anybody that passed away without coverage? Was that kind of what got you looking into this, sir? What was that like for them? What was that like for their family? What did they have to do to come up with the money? Um, and then also just, I like that line about the financial distress on top of the emotional burden for your daughter, right? Like she's going to be going through enough. The last thing we want is anybody having to come up and write. I'll use this line too, is like we'd rather them have be, I'm sure you're like most veterans I talk to where, obviously you'd rather have them be picking up a check instead of writing a check whenever that hard time comes around. Is that kind of the case, sir? All right, perfect. Um, and then I'll pause for a second. Anybody have any questions on this? Because this is obviously like the where you really dig into the why for the first time. Does anybody have any questions right here? Like questions you can ask or anything like that?
I had a question.
Go ahead.
So, how does your tonality switch from like the intro towards like objections? Like, how are you keeping control of the conversation then?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the introduction, my style, and again, everyone's a little different, but if you hear me pitch, I'm very loud in the introduction and I speak really, really loud and just kind of almost authoritative. I'll be like, so, hey Bob. Hey Bob, this is Joseph. I was just giving you a call here from the Veterans Benefits. How are you doing? What's going on today? Or how's your Monday going? I like to change it up a little bit instead of just being like, how are you doing today, sir? That sounds super robotic. Like, how's your Monday going, sir? Or how's your week been today? Or what's going on today, sir? Something like that, right? And be like, yep. So this call, just in regards to that request you had submitted for the new or just I'll say sometimes like this is in regards to what you had filled out for the new final expense and life options for veterans. I'm the medical underwriter that's been assigned to your file. Got your date of birth here, sir, as January 1st, 1950. Is that correct? All right, perfect. So I'm almost just like I have that kind of tonality, and then as I get into the beneficiary, I start just having really a more conversation with them, and I talk to them just like I talk slow pretty much throughout the entire thing, but I tone down my volume and I just talk like I'm having a conversation. Um, and like have that caring tonality when I'm going over the hard questions, right? About the beneficiary, their situation. And then health questions, kind of the middle of the script. I just try to have like a casual tonality throughout most of it. And then I'll get kind of serious again at the end. I really like this. This isn't, I guess, necessarily about building the why, but I changed this one line in the script right here. And I like this question a lot. And it's just I try to be very assumptive and use tie downs throughout my entire close. So right here, I'll just always say this. because I think that in the original script I had read, it was something like, um, do you have any significant savings or any existing life insurance policies that would help cover this cost? And for me, I would lose people right there because they'd be like, oh yeah, I got 20 grand in the bank. I don't need this. So what I say is I'll say, and then, Mr. Bob, besides what I help you with today, do you have any existing life insurance policies in place, or would this be the first one? Or you can even ask it like, do you have any existing life insurance policies in place to protect your daughter Maria, or would this be the first one for you? Something like that. And it's just like a really assumptive way to ask if they have any existing coverage. And it is super important to figure that out because the last thing you want is you don't want to get to the close and then they're like, oh, I have $10,000 in place. Let me think about if I really need this additional coverage, yada yada. Because that will come up a lot. Even though they don't mention it earlier, a lot of the times when I ask this question, they'll be like, oh no, I have like at probably 50% of the time, they'll say something like, oh no, I got 10,000 in place right now. And then it's always just like agree with a few different lines. Just don't just be like, oh yeah, perfect. How much coverage do you have? Say something like, oh, okay, perfect. I'm glad you got that in place, sir. Most people don't get any coverage until it's way too late. So I'm glad you already have a little something. How long ago did you get that in place? Okay, how much coverage do you have? And then again, you got to tie down the why on top of their existing coverage, right? So say they have, my route is say they have a large amount of coverage. Like, oh no, I have $100,000 in place now. Like, oh, okay, great, great, awesome. I'm glad you got that in place, sir. I can tell you're proactive about this sort of thing. With so then with your request here, sir, I'm assuming like most veterans I talk to, you just want to get something specifically for the burial and the final expenses for your daughter Maria. That way, the $100,000 of coverage that you have now can be used for other things like the house, bills, and to leave a legacy behind. Is that correct, sir? Okay, perfect. And then you're like reconfirming the why, right? You have to like get on the same page of why you're talking to them. And then if they have a small amount of coverage, like say they have 5, 10, 15 grand, I'd be like, okay, so then, okay, perfect. I'm glad you have that in place. Same thing. All right. So then, so with this request here, then, sir, you're probably like most veterans I talk to, where since funerals are usually 15 to $25,000, you just want to make sure you have enough coverage in place to, for one, cover that entire burial cost, but also leave some extra money behind for your daughter Maria, and for other bills and expenses that may pop up. Is that correct, sir? Yes. Okay, perfect. And then I'll move on, right? So I have to like reconfirm the why. I'm not just gonna be like, oh, you have 10,000? Awesome. Well, we're gonna get you some more added. Like, you gotta reconfirm it. Again, with the income, if the beneficiary is a spouse, I'm bringing up the income. I'm bringing that up here as well. So I'm building the why on the income as well. If they have, this works especially well if they're married and their beneficiary is the sorry, yeah, their beneficiary is their spouse, is what I'm trying to say. So, for example, if their beneficiaries are kids, this probably doesn't apply as well. But say it's their spouse, then I'm going to say something like, "Okay, gotcha. And are you kind of the primary breadwinner in the house then, sir? You guys making pretty much equal money there, 50/50. How's that work? Kind of like try to dig out some questions like that, or easy way to figure that out is just be like, okay, you working retired disabled. Oh, can't wait to say I'm retired one day myself. I still got 30 years though, sir. How's it feel? Awesome. And then what would you say you bring in per month, just to the ballpark? Yeah. And then as a household, how much you guys typically bring in? Is your income about half of that? Or are you the primary breadwinner there, sir? Or ma'am, or whatever it is. And then okay, so your wife's gonna lose around $50,000 of income whenever you pass away. Okay, I got you, sir. So that's probably part of the reason why you're doing this then, sir. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like, since you do make at least half the money, whenever you pass away, your wife's gonna lose a little bit of that monthly income. So you just wanted to make sure that she had some coverage in place, not only to cover that burial cost, but also just to have some extra leftover money to kind of deal with the next few months as they could probably be pretty choppy. Is that kind of the case, sir? Okay, I gotcha. Again, like building the why on the income replacement right there. And there's a bunch of ways you can go about that. But that's just like a really easy, simple way to build the why on whenever they pass away. And I believe when somebody passes away, their wife or their spouse does get to keep, fact check this, but you can Google it. I haven't done it in a while, but I'm pretty sure they get to keep like 50% of their Social Security income, but I don't think they keep the entire thing. So they do definitely lose some income. Um, Discount questions, I'll skip over that. One way to build the why on the health questions is really just to be like, and it doesn't even have to be like a big deal. And I heard this on one of the trainings from the guys from the playbook. There was some guy who wrote like $180,000 like a month or two ago. I can't remember his name, but he's a beast, obviously. And in his training, the one thing I picked up from it that I liked was he'll when he's going over the health questions, he'll say something like, say somebody has diabetes. Like it doesn't even have to be a serious medical condition like heart attack, cancer, or whatever. If they have just like diabetes or COPD or something like that, even things you can admit to on applications, right, and get accepted. He'll ask a question like this, and it works especially well if they've had like cancer in the past, right? But you can say something like, gotcha, sir. And then this is kind of like after you've gone through the health or in the middle of the health, say something like, okay, gotcha, sir. Diabetes, metformin or insulin? Taking insulin? Okay, I gotcha. And is that part of the reason why you wanted to do this now, Mr. Bob? Just before, diabetes or anything got any worse? That way you could get approved before the medical conditions kind of got a little bit worse there, sir? Just like an assumptive soft close on you're doing this now before your health deteriorates even further. Because once it deteriorates even further, you probably wouldn't get approved for this. So is that kind of why you're doing this now, sir? To make sure you can get approved and get some coverage in place before things get worse? Okay, understood, sir. Yeah, that makes total sense. And then just kind of go on from there. Um, another place I like to build the why is on the benefits, right? So as you'll see in my script here, I mark like the beneficiary's name, and there's definitely other. I'll bring it up in the living benefit as well. I don't have it in the script here, but I'll bring it up on the tax free. I'll bring pretty much every single benefit. I'm bringing up the beneficiary's name, right? So for immediate coverage, I'll say something like this. So that means as soon as you make your first premium, you're covered day one. There's no 2 year waiting period or anything like that. So God forbid something happens to you next week or next month, your wife Maria will get the full death benefit. Okay, sir? Locked in. Premium never increases, and the coverage amount for Maria will never decrease. Tax free. Neither the death benefit that Maria will receive, the living benefit cash value, neither of you guys have to pay any money on any taxes on the money received from any of these plans or any of the benefits here. Um, Living benefit. You and Maria will get 50% of it if, God forbid, you get a terminal illness. Double accidental payout. God forbid you die in an accident, you have a $10,000 policy. Maria would get $20,000 instead. Lastly, permanent coverage. This will never expire on you. You'll be protected forever, and Maria will, as long as the policy is active, Maria is going to receive the death benefit. There's no expiration date. So I'm just bringing up the beneficiary's name as much as possible, right? And that goes throughout the entire script. Um, and then, so right here again, I like to repeat the beneficiary, and I think this is something I didn't really start doing this until like 6 months in. But this is something that is just really easy to do, and there's no reason not to do it, in my opinion. So then, based on what you've told me here, sir, the system has built 3 packages of coverage to make sure that we get that burial cost covered for your wife, Maria, and you can decide on which option will make the most sense. So it's just like I repeat the why right here before I'm about to go into numbers again. Um, and you can say it just as simple as I just said it. You can dive into it a little bit deeper. You can be like, and I know, you said Maria's in a pretty tight financial situation. She's got 2 kids. I know she has a job at the post office, but you mentioned to me she has her plate full already. So the system has built 3 packages of coverage to make sure that we cover that burial cost and maybe leave some extra money behind for your daughter Maria as well. And you can decide on which option will make the most sense. But keep in mind, sir, we can adjust it as you please. So again, it's just bringing it up, right? And just getting it fresh on their mind right before you go into numbers. Um, and then, as you're going through the packages or whatever, bring up the beneficiary's name on all of these as well. And this will leave the most amount of money behind for Maria. This will make sure Maria is not burdened by any expenses whatsoever. This will cover the basics for Maria, make sure she's not coming out of pocket for anything, just simple ways to repeat it there. Um, okay. And then again, right here, before I go into the application, I'm typically going to read something like this. I'm assuming this is something you've been thinking about for a while, Mr. Bob, making sure you had this permanent coverage in place here to protect Maria, something like that. Okay, perfect. Glad I could be of service today, sir. So, first question's kind of silly, but I'm just going to go ahead and spell out your first and last legal name and then blah, blah, blah. Go from there, go through the application questions. Um, but yeah, I think it's important to ask a version of this or something like this before you get into the application question. Again, you're just reminding them of it every chance you get. Um, I'm trying to go kind of quick now so we can get into questions at the end of this. Um, trying to think how I expand on this, but again, I think it just you can make it more specific to their situation, But I think just the way it's worded right here in this script is a good way to ask it. It's not very confrontational. It's pretty relaxed conversation, And I'm assuming, Mr. Bob, this is something you've been thinking about for a while, making sure you had some permanent coverage in place here to protect Maria. I probably wouldn't word it like that though, if they already told me that like they haven't been thinking about it for a while and I just got here on my own sales skill. Like in the very beginning, if they're like, oh, I don't remember filling this out, and I somehow convert that person into a presentation, which, if you're good, you should be doing frequently. But if they say that and I know that, I'm probably not going to bring this up because then they're going to be like, actually, you kind of convinced me to be here. I don't want that like tension, right? So then I might just skip it right here. I might not ask it like that. I'd be like, okay, perfect, sir. And then, you know, good on you for getting some coverage in place here today for Maria. I can tell you're a proactive guy or something like that. But I probably wouldn't ask like if you've been thinking about this for a while. But if I know they have been thinking about it for a while or I have that feeling, then I'm probably going to ask that because then if I get a banking objection or a social objection in a few minutes, I'm going to be able to throw that back on them and be like, well, Mr. Bob, you did tell me you've been thinking about this for a while, sir. What's kind of kept you from doing it in the past? And they're probably going to be like, just never got around to it. I'd be like, well, is it possible that you just didn't want to give up your social security number last time either? Sir, this is always required. Go ahead and look at my licenses. We can hop on a FaceTime if you want, sir. I know this coverage is important for you, so I'm not going to give up here because I know you need this. A social security number is always required for a life insurance application. I'm going to like throw that back on them. If they've been like, yeah, I've been looking into it for a while, you know, like, well, why haven't you done it in the past? And it's probably because they talked to some guy before and they got an objection, and that guy couldn't overcome it. And then here you are dealing with the same thing. And then sometimes it just helps to kind of throw that back in their face. Like, well, Mr. Bob, like you are, and I'll obviously try to overcome it a little bit more smoother, like my first time, if I get a social objection, I'm typically just like, there's like, why do I have to give you that? That's everyone kind of feels that way, sir. It's just for the medical underwriting, but your information is secure. What's your social? And 8 out of 10 times I get it just like that. But if I try 2 or 3 times and they still won't give it to me, have them look at my license, blah, blah, blah. It might be a trust issue, or it might just be you haven't built enough of a why. And I'll start like throwing the stuff from the earlier conversation back on them. And that's why it's important to build the why, because it gives you not only does it make them feel like they really need the coverage and it's going to make stickier business and it's going to be a smoother sale overall and they're a happier client and they have more of a reason to do it and they're going to get more coverage and all these different reasons, but it gives you more ammunition to use during the objections at the end of the sale, right? Um, and then where else do I do this here? So had some shit marked on the script with the stars. Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah. So last thing to kind of touch on before we go into questions is just recapping the close, right? I did a training with some of my guys on Monday about this, but basically, when you go through the close, like my first, again, 6 months doing this, I just read directly what's on the script, and this is totally fine. This is a great script. But I think it's important now to like, for me personally, I like to go recap everything a little bit more. And I have them write down my name and number. I have to save my number in my phone, their phone. I'm like, hey, save my name as Joseph Veterans Insurance. You'll probably forget my name, Mr. Bob. That's totally fine. I won't be offended, but I want you to be able to find my contact if you ever need anything. Because I feel like that is a reason why people cancel sometimes is they don't save your number. They have no idea how to contact you. They have a question and they're just like, well, I'm just gonna fucking cancel this because I don't know how to even contact this guy. They get scared. They're old people, right? So like I try to be like make myself very accessible. I have them write down my number. I make a joke like sometimes like, yeah, put that on the fridge just in case you ever need me. save my number in your phone as Joseph Insurance. That way, if you forget my name, which let's be honest, we've only spoken for 40 minutes, you probably will. Not calling you old, but it's just the way life is. I want you to be able to find my contact. That way, you can always just type insurance in your phone. I tell them to keep their policy packet in a safe place, highlight my number, whatever it is, whatever you got to do, right? Um, and then also right here, I'm going to recap the why, right? After I kind of go through the whole spiel, all this stuff, I'm going to say something like, okay, perfect, sir. And then, again, I want to congratulate, like, this is like the last thing I want them to hear before we hang up the phone, pretty much. Because people get buyer's remorse. And sometimes they get off the phone. Like I had this guy call me the other day, and it was honestly really sad. And I spoke with him for like an hour. Huge waste of time, but it was only like $100 policy too. But he's a solid guy now. But I got off the phone with this guy. I'm on the next call, and this guy blowing me up, like calling me 5 times, 6 times in a row. And I texted him. I'm like, "Hey man, Mr. Bob," like I can't remember his name, like David. I was like, "Hey David, like I'm on a call. I'm on a call." And I call him back, and this guy's like in tears, and he is like, I can tell he's a little like, at this point, I can tell he's a little like mentally unsound. And he was like basically in tears because he was like feeling like he's like, I just feel like I fucked up. Like I gave you my account information. Like I shouldn't have done that. Like I've done this before and I've gotten taken advantage of. And I was like, David, like I promise you everything's good. It took me like 30 minutes to coach him how to view my text messages so he could see the picture of my face and my like state license. Um, but once he saw that, he was like, "Oh my God!" It was like a huge relief off his shoulders, and so that's kind of irrelevant story. But I feel like it's important here to recap the why, so you don't get that buyer's remorse, right? So almost the last thing I want them to hear from me is like, and then I'll say some version of this, right? Like, all right, Mr. Bob. And then, I want to say congratulations again on getting approved, Mr. Bob. We got you approved for the best plan here with America or whatever it is. Or again, we got you approved for that $10,000 of coverage with American General. That means that whenever that day does come, sir, that your daughter passes away, instead of having to write a $10,000 check, she's going to be picking up a $10,000 check. And honestly, Mr. Bob, a lot of people that we speak with and we hear horror stories all the time, like I mentioned earlier. A lot of people just wait until it's too late. They wait until their health deteriorates and then they decide they want coverage. Or God forbid, an accident happens or they just get old and something happens and then they pass away without coverage. And we see it every day. And I want to commend you, sir, on being proactive and taking care of this now, because a lot of people do wait until it's too late. So, again, congratulations on getting approved for the coverage, sir. Are there any other questions that you may have? Something like that right at the end. So it's just like right when they're hanging up the phone call, they're like, I'm a good person. I got coverage. I can sleep easy knowing my family's protected. And I feel like that just right there, like really just locks it down and buttons it up. And you're going to get a lot less buyer's remorse. Like ever since I've started doing that, I don't think I've had a single person text me the same week or the same day trying to cancel ever. And I haven't really gotten a lot of that period, but I definitely haven't gotten that in the last like 3 or 4 months. Like they text you the same day or the next week or whatever, or call you the next week trying to cancel, having buyer's remorse. Like if you just throw that in at the end, you will eliminate that 100%. They hang up that phone feeling like a good, smart person. That's really all I got on the script and building the why. Sorry, I know this kind of went pretty long, but does anybody have any questions?
Hey, do you have any recordings of your beginning to close pitch?
I think I do actually. Yeah, on my YouTube channel. Um, I,
Sweet,
I
what's
just
your
kind of
YouTube?
upload stuff here and there, and like whatever shorts or reels I make for Instagram, I'll put them on YouTube, just just in case I get a recruit from it. But I think I do have like some full close presentations on my YouTube channel. I have like a new agent fundamentals course that I made for my group where I go through everything like the mechanics behind how I copy and paste numbers, the mindset. I have a role play on. Yeah, so I got some stuff on my YouTube channel.
That's fire. Is that your is it just your name, Joseph Conley on YouTube?
Yeah, it's the at name is at Joseph M. Connolly. It's in my Instagram bio as well, I believe. There's like a link there with like a link tree.
I'll do it the Instagram way. It's probably easier. So it's your Instagram is that as well at Joseph M. Conley?
Yep. Yep.
Sweet.
Hey,
Yep.
Joseph,
Sure.
uh, how do you master I guess, the tonality of being a DMV worker, or do you do that at all?
No, I do. Yeah, I would say that's the kind of the tonality I have for a lot of the script is just like nonchalant, just kind of like, yep, I got you, sir. All right, perfect. And then just like okay, okay, sir, I got you, I got you. And then I kind of just like to mirror people. Like if they're a funny person and they're cracking jokes, like I'm gonna lean into all the different jokes, right? Like as much as you can, tell funny stories. Things like that, just kind of cut up with them a little bit. But if they're more serious, they're more soft spoken, I'll kind of just match that tonality a little bit. I don't go as far as like actually changing my accent like some people will, Pierce. Um, like so I have a guy on my team, Pierce, who's awesome. He did the training last week. He's really good. But he'll like if he's talking to like a country person, like he like throws on a country accent. God, it makes me laugh. But I don't do that, but I'll like I just do change my tonality and my volume with people I'm speaking with. But yeah, dude, I think it's really important to keep that like DMV employee type of tonality for the majority of the script. Um, and just make it, you just don't want it to feel, I like to have this, put yourself in a mental space of like, I'm working, if you're working in the office, awesome. I mean, I've never worked in the office. I work from home, sadly. So it's like, it's hard for me to imagine what it's like in there. But I could either imagine it's like you're in an office, so you already have that I'm in an office mentality, or it's like you feel you're in a boiler room, so it can get a little bit hard to keep that tonality. Um,
Hmm.
but I would just say like just try to just be super casual with everything. And just the biggest thing, the biggest piece of advice I could give is just you want to eliminate commission breath and you don't want to sound like you're making a sale. Like you give a shit whether they get it or not really. Like you want to act like you care because you want to help them protect your family. You want to act like, yeah, I care about veterans, I care about my job, I like what I do. But you don't want to have the mentality or the attitude or the tonality that you're trying to make a sale. You don't want to get frustrated with people. You just like if they're giving you objections, just super calm and casual. Like if I get objections, like, yeah, no, I totally get it, sir. Pretty much all veterans I talk to, they feel the same way. The reason why they need the social, sir, is because that's the only way for them to validate your medical records to see if they can approve you. Does that make sense? All right, perfect. Yeah. What's your social? Just like very casual. I'm not gonna like get all upset. Because if you do that, you've lost the sale. Um, and then it's you're just like, well, sir, like this is why it's required, like blah blah blah. Like they can feel that. And they've probably talked to some like Nigerian or Indian scammer before who got upset with them when they wouldn't want to do when they would didn't want to do something, and it's like giving them flashbacks. So yeah, I think like it's just sorry, I know I'm like this is a really long answer, but I just I think like my tonality is in the introduction. I'm kind of loud. Again, you want to make sure they can hear you. You don't know when you're first talking to somebody how well they can hear, how old they are, like if their phone sucks, whatever it is. So I'm loud in the beginning. And then as I kind of get into it, if I need to keep speaking loud, I can. But then I try to just keep it more casual, friendly, DMV tonality. Like I don't really care. I'm just kind of sitting in an office. I'm making 20 bucks an hour no matter what happens.
All right, fire. Appreciate you.
Mhm. Any other questions?
Yeah, Joey, I got a question.
Yep.
So what does your typical like day look like? Like how do you start your day off? Like, I mean, I know obviously you're in Cali and stuff. I just really wanted like a broad perspective on how you start your day and what your day looks like with your schedule.
Yeah, so my day, I usually wake up around 6:20-ish, 6:30 sometimes if I'm running late. Waking up, I'm at the gym by like 6:40. I like to work out in the morning.
Hmm.
Just kind of gets my mental space going well. And I think my body and my mind is just so used to it because I started working out like my junior year or so, yeah, junior year of college, and I would go in the morning, cut enough classes in the morning that year. And I just got used to going in the morning. So now, like, if I don't go in the morning, I almost feel like groggy and shitty the whole day. So I go work out in the morning, typically, at least 5, 6 days a week. Yeah, probably at least 5 days a week. And then so I basically go in the morning, go to the gym. I'm home by like 7:45, 8 at the latest. Shower, eat as fast as I can, and I'm usually on the phones by like I'm on Discord by like 8:15 my time, 8:30 usually latest. Or if I have like a call or a recruiting call, maybe 8:45. But I'm usually on the phones by 8:15 and I'm working till like 5:36. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I try to go
Appreciate
till
it, bro.
I mean, with the West Coast, I'm moving back to the East Coast in March, and I'm excited for it because it'll
Yeah, I
like
heard.
open up the hours a little bit more. But
Yeah,
after 6 p.m. Cali time, it's 9 p.m. Eastern. It's like it can be
it's
kind
kind
of
of done
tough.
from there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so your dialing time's kind of limited. Honestly, if I was a real beast, I'd be getting up at 4, dialing at 6, but I'm not doing that.
that's too
Yeah,
that's too much.
too much.
Appreciate you, man.
Yes,
You're a
sir.
dog though. Keep going, man.
Same to you. Anybody else got anything? Any kind of specific questions? Anything about the why? Anything like that?
How do you go, like what's your method of going digging deep into the why? I think I have a problem with that.
Yeah, and a lot of it, man, just comes from being, if you're new, which I don't know if you are, but it just comes from like the awkwardness, right? Because the questions you have to ask to dig deep into the why can be kind of awkward. And you can feel like sometimes, like, and I still feel like this, man, everyone does, where I'd feel like they're gonna get like almost like mad at me and I might lose the sale for asking this question, right? And you got to know how to ask it tactfully to where you don't piss them off. Like it's one thing to say, you know, you don't want to say, and like with this question right here, like this is the lead-in question, right? Is your beneficiary, I'm just gonna say your daughter. Is she in a financial position to cover a funeral, or is that kind of why you were looking into this? And you can see how I can like you can like change your mouth and be like, is that kind of why, Like you almost like give the impression that you don't want to ask it, but like, you kind of have to because it's your job and like like if you kind of come at it with that angle, they're not gonna get mad at you. Um, and then once they answer that question, be like, okay. And then, what does she do for work? So you just want to ask like a second. I like to start like my second question with something that's not very personal, but that can lead into it, right? Like, oh, okay. And then say it's a spouse. Because the daughter, the kids, that's an easy one. It's just what do they do for work? The spouse one, what will I typically say? I'll typically say my second question there will be like, okay, gotcha. Oh yeah, let's say something like, is your wife, is she retired? Are you guys both retired? Okay, so she's just on Social Security as well. Okay, I got you, sir. Yeah, is that kind of the reason why you wanted to look into this, sir? Just to make sure that she had the money put aside for this, didn't have to dip into savings or sell any assets or anything like that. Okay, yeah, I got you, sir. If you didn't have the coverage, what would that look like, sir? Would she have to sell some stocks, or like would you guys have to like borrow money from somebody? Or even an easier way to ask that is you could say like, do you guys know of anybody in your life? Most old people do, right? Especially if you're talking to somebody over 65 years old, like they probably have had some friends that have died, you know? So easy way to kind of go into that second question is be like, do you guys know of anybody that passed away and the family didn't have any coverage? Has that happened to any friends or family members that you guys had to help anybody out with that recently? And that's a really good way to put it too, because it makes it seem like they're in a position to even help somebody. So that's not even like an aggressive question. You can ask them like, have you guys had to help out anybody, any families that, they had somebody pass away and they had to kind of ask around to raise money for the funeral in a way? Have you guys had to help anybody with that sort of thing before? That's a really good way to put it. Um, Sorry, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but just like you want to ask a couple of different questions, especially, I mean, this whole area right here, when going over, this is the easiest place to do it, is when you're talking about the beneficiary. Are they in a financial position to cover it, or is that why you're looking into this? And then you just want to add two or three questions onto this question right here, right? Like this,
Fire.
are they in a position to cover it? Ask this question and then just dig at least two questions deeper. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just, you can work your way up to maybe doing four or five deeper questions, but just start by saying, like, is your wife retired as well? Or your daughter, what does she do for work? Just something simple like that. And then you can, from whatever the response is, then you can like pivot into, oh, okay. She works at the post office. Does she have kids? Do you have any grandkids with her? Oh, do you get to see them a lot? Oh, that's awesome, sir. So that's probably part of the reason why you wanted to do this, just to make sure that, whenever you do pass away, your wife doesn't, or your daughter doesn't have to come up with that expense because she's got her kids and she probably has a lot on her plate already. Am I on the right track there, sir? Something like that.
Hey Joey,
Fire.
I've got a question.
Yep.
First of all, great training. Um, wanted to ask you, how do you deal with individuals that are just right up front? What's the price? What's the price? What's the price? What's the price on 10,000?
Yeah, those are obviously like the worst kind of people to deal with. But typically what I'll say is I'll never, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I haven't gotten a close from like just jumping to benefits and going over numbers. Like I've probably got 5 or 6 closes from that. However, that is like 1% chance of that actually working out. But
Yeah,
sometimes
that's
I
right.
just get frustrated. I'm just like, you know what, fuck it. And I just, but that's a really bad habit. But usually 9 out of 10 times what I do is I'll say something like, sir, it is my job to help answer that question for you, and I want to do my best to give you that answer, but I cannot tell you an exact quote without going over the medical questions and figuring out exactly how much coverage you need. Some people just need a $5,000 policy to cover a cremation. Some people need a $30,000 policy to cover a mortgage, payments, and a burial. So every situation's a little bit different, sir. Obviously, the premium is going to depend on your health and how much coverage you're looking for. Does that make sense? All right. And then I'll try to like check them like that. And that's typically how I go about it. So I'm just like, sir, it depends on your health and it depends on how much coverage you're looking for. Of course, a $5,000 policy is going to be a lot cheaper than a $30,000 policy. Am I making sense with that, sir? Because I want to tell you, but I literally can't. And then, yes or no. And then kind of go from there. But then sometimes they're still just like, what's 10,000? What's 10,000? And be like, sir, well, okay, I gotta ask you some health questions here, sir. And let me go through the discount questions so I can find you the best rate out of the 20 veteran carriers. Are you a smoker or a non-smoker? And I'll kind of start with that and then maybe try to go back to the beneficiary and kind of go out of order. It's like you got to try to toe the line of like not pissing them off, but also like not just giving them the numbers. Because if you just straight
Yeah.
give somebody the numbers, like they're never going to be like, I want it. At the very least, I'd be like, all right, sir, go ahead and grab a pen and paper for me. I'm going to have you write some stuff down, at least something like that. And I'll at least go through like the benefits, health questions, then maybe the numbers, and the discount questions, and like try to touch on the why. Like, I don't know. I try to start to maybe go a little out of order. And like, you just gotta, with those type of people, you just gotta be like authoritative back to them. And if they hang up on you, they hang up on you because they're not going to buy anything if you just give them a price anyways.
Right. I had one guy I was just I started spazzing on him because he was really stubborn. I was like, sir, should I just assume you're in perfect health?
Yeah. I mean, say something like
You
that.
want
Like,
you
sir,
just want the cheapest quote?
I've heard somebody, I think it was uh, Preston Ginger on Instagram. I can't, in one of Wiley's guys, I heard him say something on a training one time where it was like, he's like, sir, it's going to be somewhere between $200 and $20. I have no idea. It depends on how much coverage you need and how good of health you're in, sir. Okay. So I'm trying to do my best. I promise you I'm going to get there as soon as I can. But with insurance, sir, there is a little bit of a process. I can't just give you numbers. It depends on your coverage and your health. So he's just like, it's in this wide range, but like, I can't tell you yet. I thought that was a pretty good line as well.
Yeah, that does sound pretty good. Thank you, bro.
Yes, sir. Anybody got anything before we wrap it up?
Um, Another question. How would you go about uh when the call is, I guess, moving in a way of trust, like they have a trust set up. They're pretty good with money. They don't have to worry about the expenses and so on and so forth.
Yeah, man. I mean, if like that's for one, like a pretty one-off situation. Like I've probably had maybe three people ever tell me that they want this to go to their trust or they have a trust. Like again, people aren't buying ten to $50,000 life insurance policies if they have millions of dollars in the bank. Those are not the type of people any of us have ever sold. Maybe you have, like, in just random one-off. Like actually, I did sell like a rich guy in California one time, but regardless, like those are one-off situations. 99% of the people who are buying final expense life insurance, they're getting 10 to $30,000 of coverage. Like they don't have money like that. But I would say like with those people, it is a little bit harder to build a why. So you have to, that's even more of a reason to like ask a lot of questions. It's like, why are you doing this? Like sometimes they might just really like insurance and they've been covered their whole life and they just feel like they want a policy for every little thing. So I would probably ask a question like, okay, gotcha, sir. And I'm assuming you have a trust, you have assets, you have money in the bank. So that's money that you want to put aside for your family, for an inheritance, for them to live on, pay off your house, for them to get a head start in their life, correct? And then with this policy here, you want this specifically for the final expenses. That way they get a check specifically for the burial and they don't have to dip into the trust to to pay off the burial. Is that kind of what had you wanting to do this, sir? Like you basically, it's got kind of the same concept of if they already have a large amount of coverage. Like if somebody has a lot of coverage or they're rich, they have a trust, they have stocks, they're like, yeah, I got $2 million in the bank. It's like, okay, so then with this request here, you just wanted something specifically to cover these final expenses in the burial. That way, the existing coverage or the existing assets or the existing money you have now can be used by them for an inheritance, and they don't have to dip into that money to pay this bill. Is that the case, sir? All right, perfect. Then I reconfirm it and move on.
Fire. Appreciate you.
Yes, sir. All right, guys. I know we've gone about an hour now, so I'll let everybody get to dialing. Appreciate you guys hopping on. Yeah, good luck. Don't be scared to ask the tough questions.